So welcome to the what I'd like to call the Comic-Con of death. We've been outsiders for so long. Yeah, we're like, they're literally, we don't even know how to be among each other because no one creates places for us to come together like this. Welcome. Yep. I don't know if you're going to make it out alive with your controversial ideas that were just talked about. So I'm going to start by I'm going to flirt with Eric a little bit. So we met.
Too.
You're going to flirt back?
No, it was a Me Too moment.
Oh,
Too soon.
Oh my God. We're really going to wrestle. Eric and I met at this, we were out in Utah. And you might not know this about Eric. I don't think it was in the introduction. In addition to being one of the most brilliant economists on our globe, and also being what many consider the Einstein of our generation, and working on cracking Einstein's unified field theory, he also is now in Silicon Valley. So very much a Silicon Valley outsider until about 4 or 5 years ago. And we met before he moved here, and we were at a gathering, and he kind of leaned in and was like, "I think that we should be good friends." And I did one of these, like, I looked behind me because I figured he must be talking to somebody, not me, because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to talk to this man about. And it turned out he was talking to me, and so we've decided to understand each other over the last many years, and it's been one of the most meaningful friendships in my life. So
For me too. I mean, Michael is one of the tiny number of people. My standing policy is just say yes, and you'll end up in some crazy country or state, in a room that you never expected, doing something amazing. So it's a great honor to be here.
Thank you. So you came into Silicon Valley, not from the startup world, not from the venture capital world. From academia, like dropped into this wild land, that's really like no other, and clearly this notion of extending life is core to it. We have this ramped up idea that the Silicon Valley billionaires and tech entrepreneurs have so much fear of death, have so much ego, that the work that you're doing around and you is the big you, all of your cronies, is about extending this precious ego for personal gain so that you can buy more Bitcoin.
I'm waiting for the disagreement.
Right, yeah. Right. Start sovereign states that float out in the ocean, so you can do whatever you want, and I've found that has been patently untrue. But I'm curious about how you feel about longevity, Silicon Valley, these delicate egos that want to be uploaded to the mainframe.
Well, talk about killing me softly with this song. Yeah, I came here also just thinking that this radical longevity was really stupid. And I thought it was sort of abhorrent, didn't get it. And I think it's very much because its misportrayal is so powerful that you have a bunch of children with billions of dollars to play with, and they dream about things that make no sense, like life going on forever. I think I remember an old Twilight Zone where the curse was infinite life. And gradually I came to understand that it wasn't really what the media portrayal was at all. I don't think that there actually is much contradiction between trying to figure out how to do end of life well and trying to prolong it, if that is a meaningful thing to be doing, to try to avoid going gentle into that good night for as long as you can. In part, I was in a place in my life where there wasn't that much going on that I was dying to extend. I mean, I had a nice life and I was happy to be here, but a lot of doors and avenues were blocked, and you find a lot of things late in life that, like, why didn't I know that Indonesian is the language for me? It's an amazing language, but all I knew about was French and Spanish in high school. I think that one of the things that is happening out here is that things are so exciting that you can find that, at a relatively advanced point in your life, that suddenly everything is new again, and you just, every day that slips through your fingers, you just want more time to do more things, because maybe you need to connect, some aspect, like in my work with my wife, some aspect of economic theory with some aspect of physics with some portion of evolutionary theory. And it takes a lot of time to accumulate those things. And so if you have people who have multiple wells of expertise, very often what they want is they want more time to explore the connections and creativity. It's not just a question about extending life or extending ego. Our mutual friend Jun Yun talks about the next frontier of radical longevity is radical fertility, because our women, may need options later in life to have their children. It may be that what we're talking about is enhanced creativity later in life. So there are all sorts of aspects to longevity. I also think that there's no way out that I know of. I mean, I don't think that you can extend life indefinitely. There's always insult, right? You always have the opportunity to step off the curb while talking on your cell phone into a bus. So I don't think that radical longevity gets you out of thinking about the good death, and I think that there are times when people have had enough, and they want to check out, and they want to check out gracefully. But I think that the problem is that the conversation's been misportrayed. And so the tabloid version of infinite life is pretty uninteresting, and I would agree with people that we shouldn't waste our money and our energy and our precious brains pursuing some sort of ego gratification program for children with too much money and too little sense.
Well, and not too long ago, I was in San Francisco as a part of Reimagine End of Life, and the founders of that conference are here, and it's going to continue. And for that conference, I brought together Ira Byock, who's known as a deep humanist, loved in this space, palliative care doctor, and Jun Yun, who is the founder of the Longevity Prize. And Ira was very excited about, he had his knives sharpened to go into Jun's vast, fragile ego, with his humanist perspective that so many people in this room have done so much to really develop in themselves. And so I got them into, again, one of these type of divided conversations. But at this time, Ira didn't know what motivated Jun.
Right.
And so when Jun started talking about his motivation, he said, well, no, let's be very clear. The Longevity Prize is the largest prize in the longevity space. Jun is definitely one of the most dynamic characters and players in the Longevity Prize and outside of it. He said, everything that I'm doing about working with extending life, this moonshot, this idea of curing aging, is going to have zero impact on my life. I understand that completely. I'm not doing it for me, I'm doing it for my children and grandchildren. And Jun recently went on, and I was a little bit like, where do I go with that, right?
Yeah.
You got all seventh generation on me. The other thing that in conversation with Jun recently, and I want to get into a little bit of evolutionary biology, he talked to me about what inspired the Longevity Prize, and it was the loss of his stepfather. And it devastated him. And he realized that, his hypothesis was that because we connect on so many other layers in these days, because we watch each other's videos, because of technology, not in spite of technology, we get deeper into each other's lives faster, which I thought was kind of a revolutionary idea in and of itself. But because we get closer to more people and also deeper with certain people, we're not prepared from an evolutionary perspective for that level of loss. And so in this kind of poetic moving the chains because he doesn't know how to deal with that loss was part of this longevity movement came from like real loss and pain, which I thought was fascinating. But we can take it wherever in the evolutionary biology.
No, that's
space.
great. I remember when my son asked me what the definition of a paradox was when he was about 3 years old, and I said, I said,
Wait till you meet Hebb.
It's a question you can't answer. And he says, like what? And I said, well, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And he says, the egg. And I said, okay, now I got you. I said, then what laid the egg? And he said, some bird that was one mutation away from being a chicken. Be careful who you raise. But that's not actually the chicken joke that I need to tell. The chicken joke, which is less funny but more important, is that the evolutionary biologist's definition of a chicken is an egg's way of making another egg. And this is sort of this theory of the disposable soma, that the only thing that really matters is that which is passable. And so usually it's what you can pass is genes, and some other species have some things like tool use that can be taught, and so there's some ability to pass meaning and memes, if you will, a primitive analog of like literature. But the problem is that the human animal, with the largest brain-to-body ratio in the animal kingdom, has a level of specificity of mind and depth of connection through language that is a complete and utter mismatch for the theory of disposable soma. We are not simply a sperm and egg's way of making another sperm and egg. There's just no way to reconcile that with the legacy of literature and culture and meaning and what it takes to get past your youth and to deepen in your appreciation for the world.
It's like our poetry is our great tragedy.
In some sense, yeah. That it's just we are here on a terrible frame for the beauty that an individual soul and life, and it's not every soul and life that needs to be preserved, but at our best, these relationships are just so devastating when you lose them. In particular, the loss of my grandfather. I continually talk to the dead, and it's harder and harder to conjure him up, not because I've forgotten what he's like, but because the world keeps changing and moving, and he's sort of frozen in time at 94 and a half. So when I seek his counsel, I'm really running him in emulation in my mind. And I think that we just have to reconcile the fact that the ability to pass language between us leads to a depth of connection that is unknown elsewhere in the animal kingdom. And that's what makes death often such a terrible tragedy, is that we are so much more than the evolutionary biology which brought us here.
Yeah, and I mean, this vision that both you and June occupy, which I think breaks down any of these barriers, is the notion of extending curiosity, extending compassion, not extending accumulation, not extending propriety, but actually extending innovation, there's obviously examples that don't fit that within the Silicon Valley space, but it at least gives, for those of you who want some space to have some freedom, like when Shoshana and I talked first about bringing longevity into this, and among the folks that were wonderful folks running NWell, was like, no, like, you feel the gate, and I really like knocked on that door loudly, because it was like, this is the shared curiosity about how we end, how we live and how we end, can be so much greater without these factions, I think. But you talk about this great word, agentic, which is with agency, and this notion of continuing. So let's talk about continuing meaningful agency, right. But then also maybe start to take us through what the places that we don't get to see, like because of the position that you occupy in this culture in Silicon Valley. You get to see every moonshot. You get to see every leading edge science. Some of it completely whacked. It's not going anywhere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, probably 90% of the stuff that comes across your desk, right?
It'd be great if it were only 90.
Yeah, okay. But I want to know the most interesting points along the longevity spectrum,
Sure.
so that we can kind of go on that journey with you a little bit.
Well, I mean, you could just, like, here's a project that I haven't gotten anybody interested enough in, which comes out of what we're doing, but look at all of the edge cases where nature gets pretty darn close to something that looks like radical longevity. So for example, Syndrome X, where there was this one freak child who didn't seem to mature developmentally and so remained an infant and I think died at age 20 or 21. We have no idea what that is in terms of some sort of an error, but certainly very, very interesting. Or if you take Hydra, they may come in a these tiny microscopic animals, they come in a sexual variety and a sexless variety. And it always seems to be that the thing that reproduces sexually senesces and gets old and dies, but sometimes the thing that doesn't reproduce sexually seems to have some sort of immortality properties. So there's some relationship between sex and death that we don't quite understand. You can look at bristlecone pines, and you can start trying to aggregate all of these things that senesce very, very slowly, or people who manage to have great productivity, late in life, freak edge cases. Like I think Schrodinger, didn't really contribute into physics, I think, until his 40s and 50s, which was very late by the standards of the day. So, sometimes you at a personal level, you just have to get lucky in order to understand what it is that you're supposed to be doing. Just out of curiosity, how many people in this room can raise their hand without embarrassment and say that you found the love of your life after age 40? Right? So, in some sense, I bet some of you didn't find the love of your life until after age 60. And if that's what happens, you want more time. You want more time. And somebody else doesn't need more time. But, you just started living late. Maybe, you worked through some stuff. I have a relative who was one of Mengele's twins, Eva Kor, who eventually forgave Dr. Mengele, which was, a little bit of a controversy in the Jewish community. But the point was that the resentment and the hatred and the anger was actually deforming her. And, what a courageous thing to do very late in life and to unburden yourself of that. So I think that, it's just important to think about both the scientific angles where, you can look at something like, let's say, lobsters, which have this sort of obligate growth, where they seem to senesce very little, but they keep getting larger so that they end up killing themselves because of the size that they have to grow to. We could aggregate all of these freak cases from the natural world and try to learn something about why nature can't solve this problem. And it's bound up in a theory called antagonistic pleiotropy, where there's a trade-off between length of life and vigor in youth. And then you can look at the personal versions of this. Why is it that, for example, hip-hop culture is so vital, and you have white suburban kids emulating the black inner city? It's in part because lifespans are very uncertain, and so life is front-loaded and much more exciting and vital and creative. So there are analogs at a cultural level with a biology level, and if you think about something like the worm C. elegans, this primitive nematode, we have a complete cell lineage diagram. We have an entire map developmentally of this organism, as well as all the 300 neurons in its brain and all the connections between them. So it's the only complicated animal that we actually have a relatively complete map of, and we still don't understand how it works. So we're coming very close to really learning why nature has never chosen to solve this problem. And if you want sort of evidence for why we should be thinking about how to die well, certainly nature is not indicating that there's any way of living forever, whether it's histological entropy and your tissues getting confused, the difficulty of preserving state. So I think there's good reason to think that we're up against a pretty hard problem. I don't think that it's going to get, I'm not particularly optimistic that we have a very fast solution coming.
Right.
But I do think that it's worthwhile thinking about both the science and the sort of freak analogs in culture and in our interpersonal relationships that make radical longevity, and also the ability to opt out gracefully in a time and manner of your choosing, non-antagonistic objectives. And I don't think that there has, and you can go back and forth between them. A beautiful story from India where my wife is from, we went to visit a relative of hers who'd gotten very sick, and she was there. She said, it's my time, and you in the West don't understand, and we accept. And I was going to be with God, and her sister said, yeah, I flew in from England, and I realized that was nuts, and she just needed some blood plasma and some fancy drugs from Switzerland. And sure enough, she was better. And there are ways in which you can be graceful about it, and also choose to fight it when you have the opportunity. So I think we need to stop thinking about these things as naturally antagonistic.
Yeah.
Both communities need to learn from each other.
Well, and I think one of the other things that I've learned from you and June is that this this moonshot mentality of let's cure aging or let's solve death, that at the core, that's actually marketing. And for those people that are getting riled up about the marketing around it, what it actually is doing is creating great science. So for June, the way that he will phrase it is that what I'm interested in is increasing homeostatic capacity, extending the time of senescence so you can enjoy life better, longer. And the way that I'm going to achieve that is by telling people that we're actually up to curing aging, or we're actually up to solving death. And which is just kind of it's a brilliant marketing reveal, and just a clever, lovely move.
Yeah, well, the idea that fundamentally your body is the hospital that you need most, it's the most effective one, and that during your youth you can do all sorts of ridiculous things to your body, and it just sort of comes back to this kind of healthful state, and that as you accumulate more cell divisions and the tissue gets a little bit confused and your extracellular complex can't figure out where things are, it makes sense that your skin starts to sag and you start to forget things, and all of these things happen. But it could well be that these things are mechanical problems. And if you found out that they were mechanical problems, imagine that we were a species where the most you could live to was 40, and somebody gave you our new limit, which is about 120 for the hard stop. One person went to 122. But would that be horrible? I mean, everybody would be reconciled to 40, and suddenly you'd just be back to where we are now. And I think you have to ask yourself, the key question, not about us, but let's say you could give radical longevity to people in the past. Would you want people looking at all the craziness going on now? Would you want to know how things, worked out in the 30s? Would you want to be able to talk to people who've been through World War I or the Civil War or the Age of Exploration? Right now, I think we're living through a kind of weird low-grade revolution of a type we haven't seen before, and frankly, I wish there were more old people around who I could talk to, because mostly what I've known my entire adult life at 52 is stasis coming out of World War II. And I think that would be a huge help.
Yeah, the lack of elders. So, I mean, and we talk about this all the time, is this notion, I think, with Reimagine End of Life, with End Well, what is required to transform a very broken system is going to include a great deal of creativity, some play, a lot of curiosity. There's things that need to be revolutionized on the dying side and the death care side. And what I understand you and your cronies to be doing, in the best case scenario, is exercising that kind of creativity and playfulness and curiosity.
We think about it a lot. I mean, I think one of the things we were just talking about is a news story hit the media that moved me and a lot of other people about a father who knew he was dying and came up with 5 years worth of birthday cards and flowers to send to the daughter, who then turned 21. She was sad that this was the last one that she was getting. And I thought, why is this a news story? Why aren't we all doing this? Why only 5 years? And I read this story and I still didn't do anything about it, So I think that, in some sense, if you guys want to lead the way and talk about how we play with death rather than whistling past the graveyard, how we dance past it, and how we, develop a more mature relationship, how we get excited about planning our wake and thinking about the order of people we want to speak, and what we want to reveal years after we're gone so that we can continue to have these conversations. I think everybody thinks very much about themselves up until they have children, and almost nobody believes, I don't care what happens to my kids after I'm gone. So just try to think about the fact that death is simply part of a program that is already immortal, which is the theory of lineage. And whether it's the lineage of your ideas or the lineage of your genes, these things matter to all of us while we're here, and it's one of the most exciting things to think about, well, what's going to be remembered about me while I'm gone? So how do we put some fun in this crazy topic?
Yeah. Hold applause, because I want applause to that. Maybe you don't, but I do. Because we're at the Comic-Con of Death, I'm going to do a couple announcements of shameless self-promotion. Death Over Dinner, a project I started. We're literally, after 4 years, about today launching version 2 of the project. So I want you to check it out. And then we're also doing a thing around living wakes, inspired by conversations that we had and a birthday. But we're out of time. They're going to kick us off the stage. Thank you for letting my friend join the death crew.